We'll learn you around here.
Yeah, that's plenty of. Ready? Here we go. Hello, everyone. My name is Wayne Hill. I'm the Tulsa coordinator for OK2A, and thank you for showing up this evening. We have a really great presentation for you. So I want to welcome you, and I want to welcome Facebook Live. This will be presented or be seen by up to 6,000 people over Facebook, and so we're going to have a good audience as well. Facebook Live, if you'll let us know where you're actually viewing from, we would appreciate it. If you have any questions at the end, if we have time, we'd love to address those, but we want to welcome you as well. All right, we have Bruce DeLay. He's pastor of Heartland Church. He's going to come up, and he is going to lead us in a prayer and pledge. We're going to use this flag right back here, you all.
I'd like to ask you to stand for prayer, and then we'll pledge allegiance. Father, thank you for this place. So many veterans have been through this beautiful place to commemorate. And when we come to a place like this, God, we are so thankful for our country, so thankful for the freedoms and liberties that you have given us and for the folks that have gone before us to make it possible. Lord, tonight I just ask that you would be with our speaker, that you would show us your presence tonight on the things that you really want to emphasize, that we would get that. And I just pray, Lord, tonight that your Son, Jesus Christ, be glorified. And we pray in his name. Amen. Attention, salute, pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So I'd like to get a little recognition here before we get started. Part of this program was funded by the Oklahoma Church Security Association, and I want to thank them for their contribution, their financial contribution. We have one of the representatives here. He's on the board. His name is Mark Neely. And Mark, would you please stand for us? Mark has 23 years of service with the Oakland Police Department. He was 30. I apologize. I did not do you justice, did I? 30 years. And he was a SWAT team leader and on the narcotics team. And they train churches in appropriate security, teach you about the law. You actually go out to the range and shoot. I've gone through the program. It's an excellent program. So if you would like to talk with Mark, he'll be available for you to actually talk with him tonight. All right? Thank you. All right. Now, I would like to introduce James Miller. James is my colleague here at OK2A. He is our legal expert. He knows all the laws. He can pretty much tell you what the law is if you have any questions. He's also familiar with a lot of the other states on their laws as well. I tell you, he's valuable to OK2A, and it's my pleasure to introduce him.
So that being said, there used to just be one law we had to follow, right?
Right.
Yes, it's a joke. So this is awesome to have. Thank you for coming. Thank you for everyone that sponsored it. This is pretty cool. I've shared this over a bunch of different training group platforms as well because they were interested into what this man has experienced and what he wants to say. So this is going to go a lot farther than this room in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So without further ado, we have Don Spencer who decided to come up, and seeing as how this year has gone, pretty awesome. HB 2597, Constitutional Carry passed into law. First bill signed by our new governor. Pretty cool, right? For a long time, he's done this. So a little bit of background about me. I moved here 6 years ago, and I was very politically uninvolved. I'd spent some money on GOP platforms, NRA, things of that nature. Watched a YouTube video about this awesome dude in the capital of Oklahoma City named Don Spencer, and I thought, who is this guy? And where am I spending my money and time? So got in my car, drove down to Oklahoma City, attended an OK2A meeting, and I went, okay, this is for real. So that's what, 60 bills later? Maybe more? I don't really know. All I know is we got a lot of liberty back. So I'd like to have Don come up here. I'm going to introduce him. Just give a quick ditty. Come on up, Don. I want to say thank you again. And the membership of OK2A, to show our gratitude, this is from the membership. We've done a couple things for Mr. Spencer. And we had a cool custom engraved M&P 2.0 Compact 9, says your name on it. On the top is the In Liberty 227 when signed into law, and kind of a blacked out logo of OK2A. So that's from in membership of OK2A. Now, as you know, being the president of OK2A, Don's salary, he's paid weekly.
Oh, yeah.
Very weekly. Meaning he's a volunteer, essentially. So on behalf of, again, the OK2A membership, wanted to present a gift to you. And by all means, that's from all of us.
Thank you very much.
So we want to say thank you for everything you do. We appreciate it. And
Wow.
I'm so glad I did that. Now, my wife's going to ask me where I bought this. So I may need some backup here. Man, this is absolutely stunning.
appreciate it.
Geez, that's I wish I could say it happens all the time, but maybe it should. Man, that'd be great. Well, I appreciate that very much. What a pleasant surprise. Because, like I say, I come here to hear Charles tonight, but I wanted to get into one thing first. With OK2A, I've been around long enough to know that evil does not confine itself to where we can always control it. And it's back in 2012 I started working with Pastor Vineyard in Oklahoma City, because it dawned on me, and actually I was convicted by it, the fact that our churches that have schools, that it was a felony for a person to have a gun in a school, private school property. And mostly it was churches that had these. I'm like, you know what? If they can tell us, the state legislature can tell us we can't have a gun, that means they can come back and tell us you can't talk about Jesus Christ. And so, for me, that's a problem. That's a big problem. So one of the bills we ran that year was so private schools could have firearms on their own property. All they had to do was say, okay, the governing board says it's okay, and have a policy stating so, which made it pretty easy. But let me tell you something: there's nothing easy at that state capitol. It went through all the zoos. The teachers' organizations were against it. Anyone that ever thought about being a teacher, that there's going to be the old story, there's going to be blood in the streets and all that stuff. But anyway, we got it passed. And then the next year we had to come back and pass so it was clear that you could keep it in your car in the parking lot, even if you're not a teacher or an employee or anything like that. We had to pass that, repeal that part of the felony. So after we got that done, because my plan the whole time was, if you can make it okay in a private school, why can't it be okay in a public school?
Right.
And one of the arguments I used all along, are you telling me the kids in a private school are of a higher value than the ones in a public school? So we need to quit that. So the next year we repealed the felony for at least having a gun in your car, because believe it or not, the previous law, Oklahoma's law, is so stupid. If you drove up and you dropped off your kid and you had a gun in your car, it was perfectly legal. But if you drove up and you dropped off your spouse who's a teacher, it was a felony. Because the law specifically said you could only drop off a student. Now, that sounds crazy. Oh, DA would never prosecute that. Oh, yeah, they will. Yeah, they will. And they'll look for just the right one to go do that with. So leading into that, with all the other things, believe it or not, churches or places of worship were not even on the list of business owners' rights. It was this gray area whether a church could actually even have guns or even defend themselves in it. It was so OK2A, and that's what I did. As I got that out and looked at the business owners' rights, you know what? All you got to do, right here in this one spot, it's just right. Places of worship. So I stuck it in there along with some other private property rights improvements and put that in there. And you know what? Even in that state capitol, it's pretty hard to vote against God. And that's basically what it was coming down to. So there were some no votes on it. There was some pushback on it. But because we had, OK2A developed its momentum, we were able to push that on through, which led us to 2 years ago, I think it was 2 years ago,
we had a places of worship bill because I wanted it clarified. And I had the right legislator call and said, I'm concerned about this, which, by the way, he's also gotten several awards from us. But he said, I'm concerned about this because that shooting that took place in Texas, what can we do? I said, well, we can't do anything legally to stop that shooter. But what we can do, because Oklahoma has this terrible, terrible thing, is that the liability is not clear, that if a church is involved in a self-defense action, that the church can be sued out of existence. I said, there's no doubt, nothing's going to change it. Whoever discharges that firearm is always going to be responsible for that bullet till it stops. But we can make sure, one, it's not criminal if it's in self-defense, and two, that it reduces the civil liability for the church itself, because I could just see a church being sued out of existence. I could just see that. And so many of you know that wasn't exactly the easiest thing, because I see a lot of faces that were up there. That was not the easiest thing to convince people. You know what? A church does not need to be sued. Well, what if Granny on the third row jumps up with her 38 starts shooting? I'm like, high fives to Granny. Because the way I know, and we'll probably hear tonight, that any pushback at all is going to help thwart any effort of evil that it's trying to perpetrate. Any. And like I've even said before, I'd rather be shot with a good guy trying to help than the bad guy. Period. So that's what OK2A has done. And we're going to continue to do. Yes, there was this little bill heard this year. I don't know, what was it? Constitutional carry or something like that? I forgot what it was. Yeah. You know, why? And we gave a victory lap because we ran it last year and got it passed, but the governor vetoed it. So, hey, let's have a party. Let's do it all again. But like I say, folks, constitutional carry. It's introduced at the beginning of February on the 6th. And it is signed into law on the 28th of February. Nothing has gone through that. Nothing. And that's because we have established our spot at OK2A. And I tell you, and I'm sure the moms of Man Action are watching right now, it felt really good on that last day when it was voted on in the Senate and goes to the governor's desk. And the fact that they had taunted me for years that this was not going to happen and that I was crazy and it was my fault for all the people dying and all that stuff. But it felt so good. They're walking through the hallways putting out this petition showing how no one wants this thing. Literally walking with their tail between their legs and just kind of like, well, we're just doing this, because don't vote for this. And then it goes down there and vote for 40-6. So it wasn't exactly close. And then the governor's basically beating on his desk, get it down here, I want to sign it. And it's also because I managed to notice that the governor didn't probably want to sign his first bill, be a marijuana bill to sign. But he kept his promise, did exactly what he said he would. He said, get it to my desk. He even sent out a tweet the week before, which just gave it the overdrive it already had to get it for the enthusiasm to get it there. I'm grateful to the Senate for working it, and then also for State Representative John Eccles and all the people that helped present that thing, because like I say, that doesn't happen. And then we've got two other bills passed. The Shockwave, everyone knows it's a 14-inch barrel, basically looks like a shotgun, got a goofy handle on it. Some guy was smart enough to design it where it's legal, but the funny thing, it was legal in California and New York, but it was a felony to have one in Oklahoma. I love these heads turning. I can hear them just snapping necks like, what? Yeah, OK2A is here to take the stupid out of gun laws. That's what we've done. We are here to take the stupid out of it. And as a clean certified instructor, there's no shortage. We still got plenty to do. So people think, we got constitutional carry, we're done. No, folks, there's people really mad. They've spent some really big money to stop us, and they'll spend even more to turn this back around against us. And you don't think so, just watch the red flag laws that are going to be introduced next year. So anyway, I won't take much any time on that, but like I say, if you're not a member of the Oklahoma Second Amendment Association, I have no idea what you're waiting on. People sit back and say, well, I'm going to see what you guys will do. No, we've already done it. We've done it, and we're going to continue to do it, and this is how we're going to do it. We've got a game plan. We stick with it, and like I say, we work with legislators. I mean, on a personal level. So personal that some of them, I only email their private email address to make sure they can see it pop up and not to their legislative address. Those types of things. so we can make things happen. And it's pretty obvious it must work. And we've got a slew of bills that were left over from last year because we only had 38 introduced.
38.
Yeah, only 38 introduced. And in all fairness, there was about 7 of them were in the constitutional carry bill, so that they won't all be messed with. But we've got 5 bills, and 2 of them are felony repeal bills. And one of them has to do, it's funny, our board of directors has 3 pastors on it. And so I said, and I warned them, this is what we're doing on this bill. We're going to protect the bar. They said, what? I said, that's exactly right, because under current law, it's a felony even for an employee in a bar to be able to legally carry a gun in that bar for self-defense. And after we saw what happened in Florida, I'm not going to sit here and make judgment on what people are doing outside of that building, but innocent people walking into a building, there should not be any reason for them to have to face a massacre, and we're going to be responsible here in Oklahoma the same way. So that's one of the felonies we're having repealed, that we're working to repeal. The other repeal for a felony is, believe it or not, most of your gun owners, carriers, if a felon gets in your car while you're in possession of your firearm, they're committing a 10-year felony. Send them back to jail, whether they know you have the gun or not. Stupid, and it's a 4th and 5th Amendment violation. It's completely crazy. But Oklahoma is well versed on violating your constitutional rights. And again, we're here to push back on that. And I want to make it perfectly clear. Constitutional carry goes into effect November the 1st, 2019. You still don't have a right to carry a gun in Oklahoma. We have to fix it. Our state constitution says your right shall never be prohibited. And then it says, but the legislature can regulate the carrying of weapons. That's the nasty, nasty, nasty part. We've got to pull the legislature completely out of the picture, unless there is a violation. So anyway, but that's what we're working on. Now, everyone keeping up with me so far? Are we doing all right? Okay. All right. I myself got involved in this organization, but there was 2 times in my life I had to pull a firearm and point it at a person for the act of self-defense. And thank God I didn't have to squeeze a trigger, because the mere presence of that firearm convinced the perpetrator that, you know what, I'm in the wrong place. Especially when you got that red laser dot lid right up around their forehead. That's pretty convincing. So I've been fortunate that I've not had to, but that's why I'm such a big proponent, because I know the mere presence of a firearm can stop a crime. Just a firearm there. Now, I also know it may take more than that to stop evil, and that means discharging the firearm. So there's a gentleman here tonight that you've come to see, and I'm excited to hear this, but Charles Van Wyck is here tonight, and he's got an incredible story that I've not heard the whole thing, so I'm excited to be here to pick this up. And Charles, I want you to come on up here, sir. We appreciate it. Welcome to Oklahoma. I'm sure no one's told you that, right? Welcome to Oklahoma. I'm so glad to have you here. And the microphone is yours, so you go right ahead.
Thank you very much, Sean. Really appreciate that.
Yep.
There we go. Well, I'm an African. If you leave it there, I might just steal it. Great to be with you in Oklahoma. I've heard that Oklahoma is just below heaven on earth.
Yes.
What a wonderful place, wonderful people. Had a fantastic time here, and thank you very much for your warm hospitality. My name's Charles van Beek. That's the way it's pronounced. Dutch name.
Thank you.
Afrikaner from Cape Town, South Africa, and just having a wonderful time touring America. I'm a full-time missionary. I had an interview with a magazine in America a while back about my book, Shooting Back, The Right and Duty of Self-Defense. And after the interview was finished, the editor of the magazine said to me, "Man, this is a great interview, but I'm a Christian, but my magazine's not a Christian magazine." So I said to him, he said, the interview is too Christian. So I said to him, well, I'm a full-time missionary. We were shut up in a church. What do you expect me to say? So let's get started. In South Africa, there was a revolution that took place by Nelson Mandela, his group called the African National Congress. As one of my black friends in South Africa said, he said, the African National Congress is actually the Communist Party. They just can't call themselves that because then they wouldn't get any international funding or any support. And so Just to give you a bit of an idea of what was going on in South Africa at the time, there was a big blockade by the Marxist states to the north of South Africa, trying to cut off any kind of operations we could have going north and moving further up north. There's also economic warfare going on in the country. There was a massive move by the communists to destabilize the country completely. We had sanctions from your State Department and also from Russia and various areas. And the whole big deal was to try and get people unemployed and then use them as cannon fodder. And that's often the communists would also use children. This is Nelson Mandela's group. Stick them right in the front of all the big unrest that was happening in the country. And then obviously police ever took action. The kids were right in the front. Completely manipulate the children. I've got a friend who's a teacher in South Africa now, and he says our whole education system is there to dumb down the children, make them as stupid as possible, so that they can be used as cannon fodder by the politicians. And so there's a big challenge. We also had psychological warfare going on in the country at the time, and that was to break down the will of the conservative people who were wanting to fight. Lots of international pressure put on us. And then there was the internal revolution, which was run by Nelson Mandela's group called the African National Congress, basically destabilizing the country and making it ungovernable. So big challenges. The idea was to force what was called the apartheid government, the white government, into negotiating a surrender and to hand over everything to the African National Congress. What lots of people don't know is that there's a massive group of conservative black Zulu people, about 6 million of them, who are very much Christianized, massive mission station amongst them, where we've seen leaders, witches, chiefs coming to faith in Jesus Christ. And these people were all peace-loving. They were against apartheid, but they didn't want a revolution. They stood against the revolution. They wanted a free market economy in South Africa. They wanted everything that you would classify as American liberty. But they were completely sidelined, and your State Department backed up the terrorists, the communists, which they've done many times in various countries in Africa. We don't hold that against the American people. Obviously, a lovely, wonderful, giving Christian nation, probably the most giving nation on planet Earth. And yet, we needed to deal with all these issues that were happening around us. And so in this context, we had one group called the Azanians People Liberation Army, which were basically communist in their ideology, but trained by the Muslims. Could you imagine? Communists and the Muslims working together. And so one night while we were sitting in Cape Town, South Africa, in the St. James Church, there was all of a sudden a noise at the front door of the church, and terrorists stepped in, and they had automatic rifles and hand grenades, M25s, I think they were called, or M26, and then the 5.56 millimeter automatic rifles was based on the Israeli Galil, for those of you who are into guns. And they lobbed the grenades into the congregation, and they opened up fire with their automatic rifles. They had taken nails and put it on the outside of the grenades to get more shrapnel, and obviously as they threw that in, there was much greater impact. I thought there was a play going on. I thought they were just doing theater for us in the church, and so I sat and watched this attack happening. And it's only when I saw the splinters in the shooting out of the benches that I realized this is not a play, this is something real that's happening. The church could seat about 1,500 people, but there were just over 1,000 people present that evening. And it's built very much like a cinema. And so we had the terrorists coming in at the front door of the church. I was sitting second row from the back of the church. And I went down, kneeling behind the bench in front of me, and I took 2 shots at the attackers with a .38 special revolver. And can you believe it? I can't believe it still. The attackers actually left the hall, the church sanctuary, which I didn't know immediately. And I was thinking, I need to get behind them at close range. And so I ran out the back door of the church to come outside the church around and then shoot them in the back to stop the attack from carrying on. But as I got around the first wall on the outside, they were already at the getaway car. And so they knew somebody was returning fire at them. And one of them was standing at the back left door of the car with his automatic rifle on his hip, looking at the door they had come out of. So they were very aware that somebody was shooting at them. That's why they left. Apparently, they were supposed to throw petrol bombs into the congregation too after the shooting to make sure that those who weren't shot and weren't hit with shrapnel would burn to death inside the sanctuary. I don't know what you call a petrol bomb. Is it Molotov cocktails? Molotov cocktails. So that didn't happen because of the return fire. And 11 people were murdered and over 50 were injured in the attack. But we had some great stories of some young men. There's one young man with the name of Gerard Harker. He's 21 years old. And a grenade landed right next to his seat in the church. And he fell on top of the grenade and took a full body blow to himself to save the people sitting around him. Could you imagine? What a hero. There's another young boy. His name was Richard O'Keel. He was 17 years old. And he had two little girls of 16 sitting next to him. And Lisa, a friend of mine, and this young man went straight on onto the ground, got as low as possible. And his one friend, Bonnie, who actually lives in America now, was sitting dead still. She was frozen. She couldn't move. And so Richard went on his knees, went up in the air, he grabbed her and pulled her down onto the ground. And as he went up, he took a bullet in the back of the head, trying to save his young friend that was a girl sitting next to him. And so I'm going to show you just a couple of photographs. I hope you can see them and that they're clear enough on my big fancy projector I have in the front here. The bottom right-hand section of the photograph is where they came in next to the stage, the attackers. And from there they lobbed the grenades in. And if you can see the back right door of the photograph, going out the back way, I was sitting just in front of that door to the left, second row from the back of the church. So when I say I ran out that back door over there, and then came around the outside of the church on your right-hand side of the photo and wanted to come in and shoot them in the back at close range. You can still see this photograph was taken with some of the corpses, part of the 11 people that were murdered that evening, still lying around there, and over 50 people were injured. This is a young man. The church had a ministry to sailors that would come around the coast, southern coast of Africa and Cape Town, and the ships would stop over and refill and have maintenance done, get more food on the ship before they carry on. And so the church would send vehicles out to go fetch the sailors who wanted to come to our church for the service. And so they would sit with us during the time of worship and singing, and then after that they go through to another hall and hear a translated service or have a translated service for them. And so the attack took place while they were still with us in the main sanctuary. And this young man, Dmitry Makagon, from Ukraine or Russia, somewhere up there, had a hand grenade land in his lap, as he was sitting there, and the grenade blew off two legs, both his legs and one arm. Here you can see where he was sitting, a photograph. That was a bench in that whole section over there that's missing, just blown to pieces, smithereens. And there's actually a hole in the concrete floor where you can see all the blood stains on the carpets over there on that photograph. This is just another angle of where Dmitry was sitting when the grenade landed on his lap. Another photograph still of the corpses there, and over 1,000 people in the church that evening. I made a bit of a mistake just being with a bunch of gun people to give you an idea of how things work. Everything moves really quickly. When I shot my last 3 shots at the attackers outside, I ran over to a neighbor's house and I bashed on their doors. I didn't wait for them to answer. I just hit the door very hard, and I shouted, "Call the police and ambulances! Call the police and ambulances!" in South Africa, you don't just open your door for anybody. So I had to shout for them to hear what's going on inside. And then I ran back to the church to go help those who've been injured. And I went into the church store with the gun in my hand. And later the police heard that one of the terrorists was a white man carrying a small gun. So you've got to be really careful when you do these sorts of things. But when, in the heat of the moment, it's pretty tough. I also later had a very well-meaning friend say to me, you know, what you did inside the church was right. You took a stand there, you shot back at them, and that was self-defense. But the moment you ran outside of the church, you were taking revenge. And that is not acceptable for us as Christians. The Bible says, vengeance is mine, said the Lord, and we have a justice system to make sure that vengeance is meted out, you know, in a decent manner, in a judicial manner. And so he said, you were wrong in shooting outside. So it gets very technical. You know, armchair theologians can have a great time afterwards telling you what you should have done and how things should have panned out. And so I could explain to him that one of the terrorists was standing at the back door of the car, and he had his rifle on his hip, and I'm sure he wasn't waiting for the congregation to come out and him to shake their hands as they filtered out of the church. So the attack was still on. He was waiting for either myself, because they said they ran away because they were being shot at, and or waiting for myself or somebody else to come out there, and he would have just loaded the firearm and blown us away. Bible there with a lot of blood on it. And then in South Africa, we had what was called the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, run by Archbishop Desmond Tutu. And basically the idea was, if you had been involved in any kind of, let's call it a crime in South Africa, which was politically motivated, you could come before the committee, tell them what happened, be very honest about it, and then they would decide if they were going to give you amnesty or not. And so this happened in South Africa, and it was just an interesting time. And just before this, I had actually made contact with the terrorist organization through the parliamentary wing, the political wing, called the Pan-Africanist Congress. And I phoned them and said, I would like to meet Kaya Makoma. Now, Kaya Makoma is a young man who was involved in the attack on our church, and he got injured in the attack, and his blood got onto the seats of the getaway car. And so through forensics, the police could connect him with the attack. They later could arrest all the others. One of the young men was killed in a motor car accident after the attack, and so he didn't feature in anything. But so really interesting. I phoned them. I said, I'd like to meet Kaya Makoma. Can I meet him? They said, well, who are you? I said, I'm the chap that shot him in the church. I'd like to meet with him. So they said, oops, well, maybe not. We'll get somebody to contact you. And so I was contacted by the commander of the organization, APLA, Zambian People's Liberation Army. His name was Letlapa Mbakhlele, try and say that quickly. And he phoned me and said, well, what do you want to do? Why do you want to meet Kaya in prison? So I said to him, well, I'm a Christian missionary. I'd like to take the gospel of Jesus Christ to Kaya. So he said, okay, well, let's meet. And so I went to the offices in Parliament, and I think I was slightly ambushed because when I got there's all of a sudden a TV crew, and I was taken into a TV interview, which I wasn't expecting, but anyway, it went very well. Praise the Lord for that. And so we had a chat, Letlapa and I, and he said, look, I will take you to meet Kaya in prison. So I said, great, here are the conditions. You need to first come with me to church on Sunday morning, and after we've been at church, then I'll take you through to Kaya, and you can also visit him at the same time. But Letlapa had a bit of a challenge because he's not just an atheist, he's also a Stalinist. And so he's a very, very, very intelligent man. He's written books. You mustn't think of terrorists as dumb, stupid, bottom of the pit when it comes to intelligence. They're generally extremely bright people at the top of their game. They know exactly why they're doing what they're doing. They have their worldview in much greater order and layout than most Christians in our churches in South Africa. And so it was really interesting chatting to him. One of the very strange things about Letlapa was that this is a Stalinist. He's been trained in China and Russia, and his favorite politician, Margaret Thatcher. What? Margaret Thatcher? Yeah, no, the Iron Woman. She's the Iron Lady. She's the one. I couldn't put that together, but either way, yeah, we have Kaya's, the young man that I visited in the prisons. We went through for the first time to the prison with the commander. I drove through, and we got out of the car there to be taken into the prison to meet Kaya. And I said to Letlapa, just hang on a moment. I've got to go hand in my gun at the security before we go into the prison. And he's like, you got a gun on you? You've had one the whole time that you've driven here? And so he went white, and his eyes went big when he realized I'd been armed the whole time that we were driving around, went to church together, and all that sort of thing. And so here we are at the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which I didn't take part in. I refused. I was asked by Kaya's sister to please come, and because you know him so well from prison, come and say something helpful for him at the TRC. And I told Kaya, I've told Letlapa, and I have to be honest with you too, that I believe that these men should be put to death. They need the death penalty for murdering people and for the chaos they caused, the murders. And so I can't come and ask for him to get amnesty. So from then onwards, I got this call from Letlapa saying, would you come to my homecoming? Now, the reason he had a homecoming was because he had been out of South Africa, and we had the states around us like Botswana and Zimbabwe, Mozambique, housing the attackers on South Africa, and so they could launch attacks from those countries that were just north of South Africa. So he had been out of the country in these various areas. Also Angola and Tanzania housed terrorist bases, and the African National Congress actually had the bases that they used to really, what can I call them? They were camps in which they terrorized their own people. And massive human rights abuses taking place in these areas. They would torture their people to death. And our previous president, Jacob Zuma, was actually head of an organization called the Ombokodo, which was like the security police in those camps. And he was obviously quite a ruthless dictator, and then later became president of South Africa, and he's just been ousted as president. Anyway, so Letlapa says to me, Charles, I want you to come to my homecoming. And I was coming home from being out of the country, having taken part in various terrorist activities from outside. So I said to him, no, it's all right, thank you. I'm not interested in coming to your homecoming. So he said, why not? I said, because I'm scared. Why would I want to go meet with a bunch of terrorists at a meeting? And so he said to me, which is very strange, he said, why are you scared? You serve a great God.
Amen.
The atheist terrorist Stalinist is telling the Christian missionary to have faith and come to the meeting. Well, that's pretty strange. Anyway, to cut a long story short, I was very concerned about it too, because I didn't want the press to start saying that Charles van Wyk is now saying it's all right to murder people in churches and that they can get off scot-free, which is exactly what was happening. And so I really had to work through these issues of I'm not a judge, not a member of parliament, I'm not a representative of any political party. The people in those areas are God's ministers of justice. That is the way God has laid out the scriptures for us. And I'm not a minister in those areas, I'm a minister of grace. I'm representing the church. And so I would go to the meeting and take the gospel of Jesus Christ to that meeting. So off I went to the homecoming, and there we met the president of their party, or the various leaders of the Pan-Africanist Congress. It was a very interesting time there together. There I am with Letlapa on the right. He's a very tall, very intelligent, very intense man. Got a lot of respect. People can't understand it. We had reporters saying, you know, you guys disagree on absolutely everything. How on earth can you even be acquainted with each other? And Letlapa said to him, but Charles is a man of his word. If he says something, it's going to happen. And so the reporter said to him, but you can say that about any apartheid politician. And he said, I respected them. They're not so useless as the politicians we have in Parliament now, a bunch of thugs who want to steal all our money and that sort of thing. He said, I respected them. I just disagreed with them on their politics. So I thought it was very, very strange. But there we went off. The lady with the white skirt on, her daughter was murdered also by Letlapa's Azanian People's Liberation Army in a drinking hole, a pub in Cape Town. And off we went for a walk together. They have a soothsayer, a singer, who sings the praises of the man of the day, so everything was revolving around Letlapa for that day. But when I got to his parents' home, where this homecoming was taking place, would you believe it? There was a massive tent in the yard. And I started asking questions about what was going on in the tent. And so people were telling me, no, there were gospel outreaches and Christian meetings happening in this tent the last week. I said, Letlapa's parents are Christians? Yes, very well-known Christians in the community. Can you believe it?
Wow.
I had later discussions with Letlapa, and he told me that he was a Christian. And he wasn't just any kind of a Christian, as we call in Africa, pew warmers. He did door-to-door evangelism. And then he said, my people are suffering under apartheid, they're poor, they don't have food, things are falling to pieces in our community, and the church has got nothing to say. They've got nothing to teach us. The Bible's got nothing to teach us on economics or politics or anything like that, and so it's irrelevant. And so I started reading Karl Marx, Friedrich Engels, and these people had the answers to our problems. Could you imagine? And so he said, I didn't believe in God after that. And so going from so-called door-to-door evangelism to becoming the head commander of a terrorist organization just boggles the mind. And so then we met the queen of the Mplahlele people, his people up there, and we're sitting in this hall. It was jam-packed with people. They had all their revolutionaries in their camo uniforms sitting right in the front of this hall. You couldn't walk. People were sitting down all the pathways in this hall. People were standing on ladders and things outside so they could see through the windows. It was jam-packed with people. The master of ceremonies was a very organized man. He told everybody that I'm dropping your speaking time down to 5 minutes for everybody. You don't have the 15 minutes you thought you had anymore. And I thought, oh no, now I'm going to have to sit. I reworked my whole talk while all the other speakers were carrying on about their politics. And every time they would say some great words of wisdom, the whole place would erupt with screaming and shouting. Every time a revolutionary in their camo uniform would stand up, they would cheer and go ballistic, and I was dying. I thought I was going to have to climb under a chair here to get away from them, but by God's grace, I survived. And then when the master of ceremonies handed over to me, he said, oh, and then we can have Charles, and Charles will have 15 minutes for his talk. And I thought I'd rewritten my whole talk while I was waiting, and so I could go back to my old talk that I had. And I told him about Jesus Christ, the world's greatest revolutionary. He came down, this man was born, he was a peacemaker, he went around blessing people, he even had a gift to heal people. And so he would walk around, people would follow him, and then people started to hate his followers. They even hated him. And after all the good things he did, they took him and they nailed him on a cross. In later years, they stoned his followers, the people that were very as close as you could get to him. And even after that, they started taking his followers and putting them in big stadiums, and animals would eat those people, and people would cheer as they saw this revolutionary's followers being eaten by wild animals. And then I told him at the end, we're talking about Jesus Christ, the world's greatest revolutionary. He came and changed the whole world, and yet he was rejected for that. And I then handed him a Bible, which was the last Bible at the Bible Society in his Sesotho language. Praise God for that. But back to visiting the prison and going to see Kaya, when I was chatting to him, he said to me, I'm going to heaven for fighting a just cause. I said, what? He said, yes. I'm 100% going to heaven because I've been fighting for a just political system in South Africa. And I said to him, but Kaya, we can't even get into heaven doing good works. What you did was bad works. It's just rotten, it's evil. You murdered people in a church. No, he's completely convinced. And this is part of the teaching of people like Archbishop Desmond Tutu. It's called, it's a revolutionary theology called Black theology. And it came out of South America, mainly amongst the Roman Catholics, I believe. And that came over to South Africa, this revolutionary theology. And the African National Congress, Nelson Mandela's group, knew they couldn't take South Africa without the church, because Christianity had been so entrenched in the population. And so they had to come and manipulate the people in the churches with this so-called liberation theology. And so young Kaya, he believed these things. And so I should say to him, Kaya, the Bible teaches us that we saved by God's grace through faith and the finished work of Jesus Christ on the cross. We cannot get into heaven even by good works, never mind your bad works. And then I had an opportunity later on at another meeting, speaking with the revolutionaries much closer to my home. I didn't have to fly to them, and had a hall full of people there, and this we used as a time to hand out Bibles, which the press didn't tell anybody about. But there again, we had the soothsayer coming along and singing. Lapa spoke to everybody, and straight after that, our friends were handing out Bibles to everybody. Well, that almost caused a riot, which, as I say, didn't happen because the press never spoke about it, but there was absolute chaos. We even had some Rastafarians get their Bible during that time, and after this time, we had a time planting a tree in remembrance of those who died at the church. And so taking the gospel of Jesus Christ to these people is paramount to me. I, just a part of my testimony, went through a tough time afterwards. You have all kinds of strange things going in your mind after this kind of thing, with grenades going off and the tension of that. And so you'd be sitting in a church and a door would bang and you'd almost jump out of your skin. You think you've been followed all the time, you get headaches and all sorts of things. And so you go a little bit, feel a bit strange after an attack like this. But here we are having an interview with one of the attackers, and when I met him, Masi Kumbusi, I walked up to him, I shook his hand. The first thing I said to him is, "You're going to hell for what you've done." That was our introduction. And he looked at me and said, we've got to talk, which we unfortunately couldn't. There's just too many people around. But then we had the 10th commemoration, which happened. And isn't this great? I know this never happens in America, but here we have the freedom fighter and the gun-toting missionary, from enemies to friends. So they for freedom, and I'm the gun-toter. I'm the one who wants to shoot people. And it was actually a very good article, but still, the heading is just so strange. And so, at the end of the day, in many circles, you get made to be out the one who's defending. People would say, yes, well, you're using violence to fight violence, and that sort of thing. No, violence is the immoral use of force. Right? Self-defense is the moral use of force. And we as Christians have our morality dictated by God through the Bible. We fight differently to people. My Christian friends that were working in Sudan had, they told the story of a commander of the northern Islamic forces fighting the Christians and the animists, those who worship their ancestors in the south. And this commander, Muslim commander, put up the white flag. He came down over and chatted to them with somebody with him. And as they were going into discussions, he said, "Everybody in my battalion and I want to become Christians." And they said, "What?" He said, "Yes, we want to become Christians." They said, "Well, why do you want to join the Christian forces in the south of Sudan?" And he said, 2 reasons. The tenacity with which the Christians fight. They will not give up. They are hardcore fighters. He said the second thing is the grace they show to our prisoners of war. The Muslims and the communists will put you down and put a bullet in the back of your head if you're a prisoner of war. The Christians don't do that. They will clothe you, they'll look after you, and the the pastors in the military of the Southern Army would come and take the gospel of Jesus Christ to these people. That's the way we treat prisoners. That's the way Christians fight. We fight to the death. We're hardcore fighters, but once it's over, we show grace. The same grace that Jesus Christ showed us, we show to others. And so I had a beekeeping course, outreach for the attackers. It was a wonderful time meeting many different people. There again is Latlapa and one of his right-hand men. We're sitting in a restaurant, just sorting out the beekeeping course. My pastor came and spoke to the young men too. My pastor gave what we call a gospel presentation, and one of the big guys sitting, rocking in his chair, all of a sudden stopped rocking. And he said, "Mark, this gospel sounds like the true gospel." Isn't that strange? They've been hearing liberation theology all the time. If Jesus Christ was around today, he would have had AK-47, he would have been on the side of the terrorists, and he would have been shooting up people for a just political system. That's what they were told. When he heard the true gospel, listen, that's not a Christian at all. He listened and thought, this makes sense. I think I've just heard the true gospel. So here were some of the ruffians of the Azanian People's Liberation Army. These are not the people that took part in the shooting. These are their colleagues, or cadres as they're known. And so we jumped in the back of a pickup van, and really interesting time together. So this young man there, Lindile Kilye, is a unit commander, and he would have control of all the young men that came on the course. And if they were a minute late, he would give them a dressing off in his language. I don't know what he was saying, but their smiles turned to sour faces. And to cut a long story short, him and I became quite friends. He tells me that he put his faith in Jesus Christ and introduced me to his brother, who's a pastor. He said to me, I was involved in the intelligence side of our organization when the attack took place at your church. Our greatest desire was that there wouldn't be a single living soul afterwards. They wanted to kill 1,000 people. And Letlapa also introduced me, that's the commander introduced me to one of his friends of parliament. And he said, this is Charles van Wyk. He said, there we attacked the St. James Church thinking it was a gun-free zone. But boy, did Charles have a surprise for us. And so, it's just from the horse's mouth. They attacked the church because they thought it was gun-free. They thought there would be no resistance at all. And then on top of that, there's a little bit of criticism in the press for me having a gun in church and shooting back. And here's a Stalinist atheist, and he says to me, what is wrong with those people criticizing you? What were you supposed to do? Sit and watch the whole attack take place and do nothing? I thought, oh, this guy's got more brains than our Christian friends in some churches. And so, Lindile Kilye introduced me to his brother, who's a pastor, and now our ministry is supporting his brother with Bibles for the new converts in their church. Really interesting how that could have come out of such a terrible attack. And so here they are. We had a great time together. When I first set up the beekeeping course, I told Lindile Kilye that I didn't want any morphies taking part. Now, morphies is a word for effeminate men in South Africa. He was highly offended and said, we don't have any morphies in our organization amongst the attackers, So we just had a good, fun time. Got the certification. And then we ran, our ministry at the time ran these courses called Great Commission courses. And I asked Lindile Kilye if he would come and speak at the course about why he became a terrorist, what led him to it, what kind of philosophy does he have, what is his worldview like? And so he came and spoke to us on one condition. He said that there's no recordings. And we said, fine, come along. And so he sat there and we could ask him questions. One girl put up her hand after he spoke and she said, have you ever murdered anybody? He said, yes. Next question, please. It's cold as steel. And we carried on. Eventually there was a big black man sitting in our benches in the boardroom there. And he was from England. He wasn't even an African. So he puts up his hand. Lindile Kilye says to him, ask your question. So he says to Lindile Kilye, I used to be like you. I used to be bitter. I used to have hatred in my heart. But Jesus Christ changed all that. I put my faith and trust in him, and he changed all that. I'm not bitter and I don't have any hatred anymore. That's all he said. Well, after the meeting, I walked out of the class, the boardroom, just like everybody else. The next thing I heard Lindile Kile shouting inside the boardroom, "Where's Charles? Where's Charles?" So I stuck my head around the corner. I said, "Here I am." He came up to me. He said, "You set me up. You set me up. Whenever you meet people, you must find their weak points. And that black man, well, he's also black, but that black man from England, he found my weak point. I've got hatred in my heart, and I'm bitter." Well, he later said that he put his faith in Jesus Christ, and he's the one that put me in touch with his brother, who'll be helping with Bibles for the new converts. And so here's my book, Shooting Back the Right and Duty of Self-Defense, which is published by WND.com here in America. What an honor to be an African missionary running around in Central Africa and to have a book published in the States. It's just absolutely amazing. They've also made a documentary video on my book, and this is really what it's all about. Now, all things are of God, who has reconciled us to himself through Jesus Christ and has given us the ministry of reconciliation. And so even with our own enemies, we can take the gospel of Jesus Christ to them. We can reach out our hands to them. Doesn't mean you agree with anything. I can forgive these people. I can get rid of the bitterness. Bitterness only eats up the person who's bitter. It doesn't eat up the person who caused the bitterness. And so getting rid of that, forgiving the people, but yet still going to court and asking for justice and calling for the death penalty for them. In other words, you free yourself of this hatred and the sin and the bitterness, but you still call for justice to take place. That's by the ministers of justice, the government authorities that God has instituted. We as Christians show that we're the ministers of grace. And here's the big thing. Here's gun control. The 20th century, all the countries that had gun control, the years that their laws were passed, and then the amount of people that were murdered in their gun-free zones, their own governments murdering them all. And that's the challenge. If both sides are shooting each other, we call it a war. Genocides only take place when one group, normally the population, is completely disarmed, and usually the government is armed. That's the only time you can have genocide, is in a gun-free zone. So there we go. And also my website, if you'd like to follow some of our work. I've got some leaflets there about my ministry as a missionary working in South Africa, Zimbabwe, Zambia, and Congo. The Democratic Republic of the Congo, which isn't democratic or a republic. But back home, there's chaos at home. We've had cars stolen on both sides of our houses. We've had a neighbor murdered 100 yards up the road. Another neighbor was stabbed inside his house, and they caught the stabber in my backyard. One can go on and on about the chaos in South Africa. Just the weekend before last in Cape Town, there were 43 murders in one weekend. We have around 18 to 20,000 murders in South Africa every year. I think one of the highest rates in the whole world. And so absolute chaos back home, far worse. People are always saying, apartheid was bad. Yes, it was bad. It was an abomination. But what we've got now is far worse. And so if there are any questions, I'd like to take that. I don't know how many minutes we still got left.
I mentioned your new book.
Yes. Pastor Bruce has just reminded me, I've got another book that will be published, Lord willing, around about November or December, and it's called Reloaded, Shooting Back Again. And that's about an attempt at carjacking, and I got into a shootout regarding that too. So, yes, sir.
What must a citizen there do to be able to obtain a pistol or revolver?
Great question. What must a citizen do in South Africa to be able to have a revolver or a pistol? We've got a lot of hoops we need to jump through. We need to be able to do certain shootings, and there are people that are licensed by government to see you through the process. So you need to be able to go shoot on the shooting range, show that you can actually handle the gun. They'll train you to use it. Then you have to study the laws and various things about guns, and then you have to write an exam on that. And once you've been through all that, then you put in an application to what is called the Central Firearms Register, and they can still deny you your firearm. So I've had friends that have been in the military for 2 years. They've done all the training at a high level with regards to gun ownership. They've done the tests, the exams, they've gone to the shooting range, they've passed everything, and the government wouldn't allow them to get a gun. The great thing that is happening in South Africa is that there's been a backlash by the courts, because the government is trying to control the courts in South Africa, communist society, they try and take over everything, control everything, and so whoever goes to the courts and sues the government, if their license is denied, they basically get their gun. But not everybody's got money to do that. And so that's what's happening in South Africa. Now, one of the most terrible things in the Firearms Control Act in South Africa is that you are guilty until proven innocent if you break the law. Now, the only country I know that's got such a stupid legal system is the French. Where, I mean, how on earth do you prove that you're innocent? And so the police don't even have to prove that you are guilty by association. You've broken the law, you must go prove your innocence in court. It's the only law that I'm aware of in the whole of South Africa that treats people in that way when you come before the court. Every other law, you're innocent until proven guilty. So it's an extremely bad law. It controls how much ammunition we have. We can't have more than 200 rounds unless you get special licenses for that. And just lots of terrible things. Our right to life, our right to being innocent until proven guilty, and all sorts of things. Our right to ownership of anything is in jeopardy right now. They're talking about taking the farmlands away of the farmers in South Africa, and yet the wording of the law is so bad that they can literally come take our guns and also our houses in our suburbs. So it's a big threat in South Africa right now. The farm murders are a very big issue. You're having people that are drilling holes with drills in farmers or his wife's head. They're taking irons that you iron clothes with and blow torches and burning women's breasts and burning the farmers, slitting their throats. And after torturing them for 4 to 8 hours, they'll eventually kill them. And so we've got a lot of chaos. The black farmers are also dying in the same percentage as they are of white farmers. And so there's this massive chaos in South Africa right now. So we need lots of prayer for our country. Yes, sir.
I made a comment last night that freedom there doesn't mean the same thing as when we say freedom here.
Yes. So our words are very different in South Africa. So if you send a reporter over to South Africa and he goes to political meetings and he's talking about freedom or shouting about freedom, your reporter thinks about American liberty. Right? Freedom in South Africa is not American liberty. And so the words are very different. And I'll give you a context of freedom. The attackers of our church say to me that we and our friends spilled our blood to put these people into power, but they're not sharing their freedom with us. Right? Freedom is the loot. Freedom is jobs. Freedom is getting your hands on the resources. It's not American liberty. Democracy is the same idea. We talk about democracy in Africa. It's not American Republican democracy that you have here. South Africa is not a democracy. When we vote in our elections, we vote for a party. The party gets allocated its seats according to the ratio of the percentage of the votes they won, and then they'll put people in those seats. And so the member of parliament sitting in the seat has only his allegiance to the party leader who put him in the seat. And so that's how abortion was brought about in South Africa. Nelson Mandela told all his members of parliament, you will vote for abortion, and if you don't, you'll be out and we'll replace you with somebody else from the squatter camp. And so the Catholics that were in his party didn't go to parliament that day, and they were fined for not being there, but that's the way they pushed the abortion laws through. He didn't give his people a conscience vote. So that's the way African democracy works. Next question? Yes, ma'am.
Are you having an increase of kidnapping?
Has there been an increase of kidnapping? Are you?
A friend of mine from Durban was just kidnapped.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
May.
A woman or a man?
Woman, Crossmore.
Oh.
Trucking. It's a
Sorry to hear
large
that.
company.
A friend of hers has just been kidnapped in Durban, South Africa. there's chaos everywhere. Kidnappings. One of the big challenges in our country is baby rapes. Just before I left Cape Town, it was a 10-month-old baby was raped. So we have the witch doctors telling the men that if they have sex with a young baby or very young girl that's a virgin, they will be cured of their HIV positive status and they'll become negative. And so these are the kinds of things we're dealing with. When you speak to an American audience, I'm sure many people think Shaw must be lying. I sat in a meeting with a bunch of men in Arizona. I could see one chap was Googling everything I was saying. He couldn't believe it. And then obviously all the truth was coming up. And so eventually I sort of backed off a bit. But that's the kind of chaos that we have in our so-called democracy in Africa. Absolute pandemonium. We live with big walls around our houses, burglar bars, security gates, big dogs, guns, whatever it takes. And the government is working extremely hard to disarm the society completely. They want a gun-free zone. The former terrorists that I've been working with, it's strange that this is going out on the internet and everything, but they've told me they're working towards the second revolution in South Africa. Very open about it. There's a political party that said that they're not going to murder all the whites in South Africa yet. In other words, that's our final aim. And so there's a lot of this chaos. The second revolution, I'm told by my former terrorist friends, that's not going to be a race-based revolution like the old one. It'll be a true communist revolution with the poor overthrowing the rich. That's what they tell me. Yes, sir.
For our education, for self-defense purposes, could you give us the short version of what happened with your attempted carjacking?
Okay, just a short version of my attempted carjacking, just for your edification. I was taking, in fact, one of the former terrorists from the organization back. He did one of the courses I showed you about. He came on a Christian camp with us. I took him back to, we call it a township. It's a large area that was a squatter camp. There's some formal housing, some informal housing in it now. And he had told me, we had agreed on where I was going to drop him off. And as I was driving down the road, he started shouting in the back of the car. It was a pickup with a canopy, a cover on the top. So it's enclosed at the back, and he was sitting in the side of this back side of the pickup. And he was shouting at me, go over there, go over there. And so it was not where we had agreed to meet, and so I did a U-turn. I went and parked where he told me to. I got out the car, and I opened the back of the car, the pickup, and I started helping him pull his bags up, and all of a sudden I heard somebody behind me call me. I turned around, and there were two armed men standing right there. And so they said to me, we want your gun, we want your cash, and we want your cell phone. And so I said to them, well, I don't have a gun, but you can have my cash and the cell phone. And so they took that, and they body searched me. And by God's grace, it didn't go low enough. I had my gun in an ankle holster. And so they body searched me about 3 times, 4 times. I mean, they went on and on. It's as if they knew that I carry a gun. They were very, very organized, very well disciplined. Body searched me a couple of times. And then they left me because I didn't have a gun, and they went and harassed a very old gentleman that was with me. We were going to do a radio show in Cape Town. I'll do some radio too. And so they were harassing him, saying, where's the gun? What's happened to the gun? We want the gun. Give us your cell phone. He said, I don't have a cell phone. Give me cash. I don't have cash. Give me your gun. No, I don't have a gun. And so they started getting angry. But in that time, I managed to pull out my firearm, and I was on the opposite side of the car to them. And so I went low between the windows so they couldn't see me, and I went through to the front of the car, what we call the bonnet, the front section. And then our cars we drive on the different side to you. So the person was on the left of the car, and I shouted at the attackers. And as soon as they took their eyes off my passenger and they looked at me, I opened up fire at them because they were sticking the gun right in his side, threatening to kill him. And so I opened up fire straight away, and I shot a couple of shots at them. They were running away, but I think they're still running. But without even knowing, they were so organized, they had a sentry stuck amongst the shacks, the housing, the sheet metal housing. They had somebody, I didn't see him at all, and the person I was dropping off shouted at me, Charles, get down, get down. And I could hear the gunshots coming towards me. and I ducked again behind the car. We jumped in the car and we drove off as fast as we can. And so I don't know where that sentry was, but they had a sentry waiting in case things didn't work their way. Things didn't work their way, and so he opened up fire at us, which is quite a scary thing. Yes, sir.
What is your motivation for staying in that country?
My family's been there since the late 1600s, and so I have that reason, but there are a couple of other reasons. Is that I believe that I need to stay there and disciple the nations. I don't see any other way that Africa can come out of all the nonsense it's involved in, which is a lot of witchcraft and that sort of thing, except by the gospel of Jesus Christ, what the scripture refers a lot about as the gospel of the kingdom. And so I'm there to work towards that. We believe that we're going to see great revival, great reformation happening around the earth, and so we're working towards that. The other thing is I don't want the communists just to have a free go and just get their way so easily. I want there to be there to irritate the living daylights out of them, and so expose them whenever I can. And God's really put me in a very unique position. I'm traveling to 9 different states now. I get blessed with people who are just really been wonderful and offered me accommodation across the Bruce and my friends over here, Joe and Myrna. And so I've traveled around the states. I've got a platform, as they call it, to be able to tell what's going on in South Africa and tell the truth about it. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of horrible things stated on the video with Facebook about, Charles not telling the truth, this isn't right, it's par for the course. But I'm going to irritate them as much as I can, the bad guys. Yes, ma'am?
I'm just curious, since you have a gun over there, coming over here to America, are you allowed to transport your gun into?
No, you can't transport any guns into America. As far as I know, you can bring rifles in, I think for hunting, But somebody actually in America, I gave my gun that I used at the St. James Massacre as a gift to a Christian mission organization, and they sold it off, and an American bought it. It's a cheap little Saturday night special, and so the money went to missions. But he was in America here. He wanted to bring it in to give it to the NRA's museum as an artifact, and for 2 or 3 years he couldn't get it into the country. Absolutely impossible. And so it's still in my care. Yes, sir. Sorry, can I just say, how much time do we have left? Somebody's going to take over here if you want to.
Breakfast is at 6.
Can we take a last question?
Yeah, take one more.
Thank you.
If memory serves, South Africa was a nuclear power.
Yes.
What happened to your nuclear weapons?
All right, what happened to the nuclear weapons? South Africa was a nuclear power. We still got nuclear power stations for electricity, at least one down in Cape Town. I don't keep up with this sort of information, but we got one there. Things are really bad in it, falling to pieces. All the French people that set it up and ran it for us left the country with the African National Congress coming to power. Apparently, things are terrible. There are leaks and all sorts of things happening there, and everything's falling to pieces in our society. Everything's been run into the ground. The police force, the military, the hospitals, the roads are full of potholes. It's just falling to pieces. Something very interesting and very strange happened. There was a laboratory up in Pretoria, near Pretoria, which was also to do with nuclear power. And apparently, the new government had organized with the Russians, it might have been the Chinese, I'm not sure about this, sorry, but the Russians or the Chinese were given the laboratory as a gift from the new government, the African National Congress. And so their scientists were inside the laboratory, busy taking everything to pieces. And the next thing, the police were called, and they went in and arrested all these people. And only later it was found out that this was being given to a gifters to their country. And so they were legitimately there. But the point is, if the police hadn't been called, the press would never have found out about this. We wouldn't have known any better. But literally, they gave it away. And I assume it's part of being paid back for the support during the revolution. And I think that's all. Thank you very much.
One more question.
Another question.
Yeah, here's the last
Yes, sir.
I'll settle for one question because I've got time. Vis-a-vis the carjacking, were you a target of opportunity or a designated target? What's your feeling?
Good question. Was I a designated target, or was it just an opportune time for them? I think I was taken into, we call it a hinderlaag in Afrikaans. a setup where you get taken into it. In war times, you have people, what's it called? I can't think of it in English. An ambush. I think I was taken into an ambush. I've spoken to some highly decorated American people who've been training forces in Eastern Europe, training police forces and things. I explained to them exactly what happened. They got a big smile on their face and said, this was pretty much organized, the conditions. And so the person I had in the back of the car, I believe, took me straight into that. Yeah, and the fact that opportunists don't normally have a sentry stuck away somewhere that's armed to shoot at you if things go wrong. You know, they're normally just a bunch of hoodlums. These guys were very organized. So I think they were actually part of the old military terrorist establishment, for want of a better word. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Now, if you didn't get all your questions answered, Charles is going to be tomorrow at OPAC in Oklahoma City. So you can pick right up where you left off right here, because I'm sure there's other questions to go on through. One thing I do want to add tonight, in a situation just like Charles found himself in, you could be in a bit of a legal problem in a self-defense act. And so OK2A has been long partner with the U.S. Law Shield. And if you're not a member of U.S. Law Shield and you carry a firearm, folks, you need help. As soon as something happens, you need to say, I have an attorney. And here tonight also is Adam. Adam, raise your hand, stand up just for a second. Adam is with U.S. Law Shield tonight. Folks, I'm telling you, consider if you're not involved in some other type of legal protection to check into U.S. Law Shield tonight. Adam's right here to work with that. Also, I'm going to request too, you got that hat ready? We're going to take up a love offering for Charles for tonight, for coming here and doing this, because it's only South Africa, so what's that bus fare? $4. But anyway, folks, we're going to pass a hat here. Go ahead and start with that. We're going to pass a hat here. I want everyone to kick in just a little bit what you can here as a love offering for him for this. And Facebook Live, I thank you guys for being with us tonight. Kendall, you can go ahead and shut it down. You guys have a good evening. Folks here, let's see, I think on the way out the door, OK2A has a form.